somebody else could grow up in a family like that and believe all those naysayers and let it hold them back. Why do you think you didn't? Why, you've been called a disruptor, and and stuff like that. I mean, why are you like that?
The thing is like, I don't believe that I didn't. Like, I did internalize a lot of that, I just was so freaking defiant and angry about it. Like, angry about what I had to endure, angry about the way that my life was going, and like pissed enough to make a difference, like mad enough to be like, I'm not going to let this define me. Like, screw you, like I will show you how my life is going to go.
Welcome to Onward Live, a live stream focused on encouraging you to create a life you love living now. Let's go beyond success to significance. Being clear on our why is crucial. It requires doing the inner work, finding ourselves, getting to know ourselves, embracing our inner child, shedding social conditioning, and letting go of perfect. We know obstacles make us stronger. We can dream big and take action. Believe you can, and you're halfway there. I invite you to tune in every week and engage with me and my inspiring guests. Invite your friends. Let's make time for what matters most in our lives. Let's move onward together.
Kelly is my guest, and we're talking about how to blast past the naysayers and to do exactly what you want. And I think that we need to do some of that if we want to create a life we love living. So this Onward podcast, or Onward Live, has evolved as I've evolved. When I first retired from working for the Navy, the tagline was Onward Podcast. It was about moving onward past adversity, facing adversity and moving onward. And then I changed it to facing adversity, moving forward, and discovering ourselves along the way, because that's what we do. When we face adversity, we learn so much about ourselves. And then I changed it just in January to create a life you love living now. And so some of my guests are going to be talking about adversity they face and how they've created a life that they love living now. And clearly Kelly has. It says here in her bio that she loves traveling, surfing, poetry, hiking, connecting powerful women to one another. She's visited 80 countries and every continent in the world. She was born in Arizona, raised in Hawaii, and now lives in Portland, Oregon. Welcome, Kelly.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. My book is right behind me, but there's like a freak ray of sunshine coming through in Portland, which we never have.
Yeah.
And it's just shining.
Shine in Portland.
Like, it's just shining on the cover of my book. It's literally illuminating it.
I love it.
Wow.
I love it. So I can't wait to talk and learn more about you. I mean, you visited every continent. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's so funny because when I did it, I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, it wasn't like something that I set out to do. I just knew that I was really curious about the world, and I always, wanted to know what was out there, and I just started going. And I think a lot of that has to do with how I was raised. And I just kind of like, I remember being younger and always wanting to be older. Like, I was one of those people in middle school who was like, no, I'm 23. Like, I'm past this phase. I'm stuck here, but I'm really older, and I kind of always felt that way. Like, even when I was in high school, I was like, I'm ready to get out. So once I could, I just like shot out, and I just traveled as far and wide as I could. And then one day I ended up in Antarctica, and I was like, huh, that makes 7. So
did you do it for work, or like, how did you fund your trips?
Well, I started working in the women's travel industry back in 2009, late 2009. And I was 23, and I started my first business, which was called Go Girl Guides, which published travel guidebooks for women. And that business idea came to me in a dream in the middle of the night. And I was like, I have to figure out how to make this happen. It was given to me. It was my calling. I have to do it. So I really had like zero experience in publishing guidebooks, zero experience in like picking page stock, like, really knew nothing about publishing. I had a journalism degree. I was working full time as a journalist at the time. And I was just like, you know what? This is my calling, because I think I was subconsciously doing a lot of traveling and like noticing things that weren't making it into my guidebook. So I said, if I was going to tell my girlfriend or my sister, like my best friend, what to do in Thailand, what would I put in a guidebook for her? So that's how Go Girl started. So that was my very first business in 2010. And so I was traveling a lot, backpacking a lot, but then I would come home and bartend and really just like save every penny I had. I would work 3, 4 jobs. At one point, I had like a 4-hour window that I wasn't working for the entire week. That was like Sunday afternoon was like the only 4-hour time period that I had, because I was either working my full time 9 to 5 or I was bartending every night, picking up shifts on the weekends, just like doing whatever I could so that I could save, so that I could keep traveling. I started Go Girl and I like didn't totally know what I was doing. I just knew that it hadn't been done and that it needed to be.
People
So
might get that dream or that download and ignore it. Why did you do something with it?
I mean, I was 23 and like, I was fearless, right? I was like, why not? Like, why would I not pursue this? It was given to me, you know? And I think
Yeah.
like that, like I could have just stayed working in the cubicle that I was working in, which I hated. And I could have just, I could have just ignored it, but I knew that I loved to travel. And I knew that I was passionate about women's travel. And I knew that I was finding myself and my independence and my strength and my voice much more the more that I traveled. So I just knew that I had a passion for this. And so
Well,
so
and you
that started it all.
yeah, and you mentioned, about when you were growing up. So what you sent me, it says that you were constantly told by others that you would never succeed, and you didn't let that stop you.
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up in Hawaii, which is a beautiful place to grow up. I'm so proud of that, but I had a terrible like home life basically until I graduated high school and moved out. And I moved out when I was 17. Literally 3 days after I graduated high school, I was like, peace, out of here.
Wow.
I just had a really difficult step family, really like abusive household. I was always told that I was fat or ugly, or I didn't fit in. I wasn't wanted. I was just like taking up space. you know I was like very much on the outside looking in, and so because of that I was always out of the house. I was just always at my friend's house. I had an older boyfriend that I was with all the time. I just was like doing anything I could to get myself out, but I also knew that like what was happening in my house was fueling me to like to shoot out, to like really go for it, because I just wasn't going to stand for it. And I like I said, I grew up in Hawaii, beautiful place, lots of people don't ever leave. So
Yeah.
after I graduated high school, I got on a plane 3 days after I graduated high school. I was 17, barely even 17. And I was like, okay, I'm out of here. And I flew to Arizona and started a life there, as much as I could. And I finally felt like, now I finally feel like my age. Like I remember thinking that, I finally feel like I'm finally independent the way that I've always wanted to be.
I mean, somebody else could grow up in a family like that and believe all those naysayers and
Yeah.
let it hold them back. Why do you think you didn't? Why, you've been called a disruptor, and a trap, and stuff like that. I mean, why are you
I
like
mean,
that?
the thing is like I don't believe that I didn't. Like I did internalize a lot of that. I just
Okay.
was so freaking defiant and angry about it. Like angry about what I had to endure, angry about the way that my life was going, and like pissed enough to make a difference, like mad enough to be like, I'm not going to let this define me. Like screw you, like I will show you how my life is going to go. And I think some of that, when I was like 11 years old, my mom sat me down and she was like, I'm really sorry that this is the way things are for you, but you have two choices. Like you can let this define you, you can internalize it, and we won't blame you for whatever happens in your life as a result of this, or you can use it as fuel. And I think in that moment, being so young, being 11 and hearing like you have a choice in how you want the rest of your life to be, that was a really pivotal moment. because I recognized like, yeah, I'm not just going to let my life, you know, I'm not going to hang on to the back of the truck and just let it drag me around. Like, I'm going to be in the driver's seat. I get to say what happens to me. And then there was obviously the 11-year-old part of me that was like, no, this is your fault because you put me in this situation. But, you know, that's neither here nor there. And like, and I do think so. At first, I was like out of the house and I was kicking butt. And I was, you know, I went to school to be a journalist, which I always knew that I wanted to do. And I went to the University of Arizona, which I always knew I wanted to go to. And I just kind of was like on this path. And then I just started accomplishing and creating and creating and creating. And like that still is a really comfortable place for me. Like I love to create things. I love being an entrepreneur. I love coming up with new brand ideas. And that was great like for the next decade of my life, you know. And then I think after I turned 30, I looked back and I was like, okay, I started Go Girl, which then turned into a 3-day national conference called the Women's Travel Fest, which then turned into another company called Damesly, which takes women traveling on tours around the world. So I've just created all of these really awesome brands. I've been in the New York Times, I've been all over the news, I've done these really cool things. But then when I slowed down, I was like, but I'm actually not okay. You know, I'm actually not okay. And I really had to address like all of those feelings that I had been burying, that I had been carrying, you know, and like in some capacity, I'm still very thankful that I did grow up in the way that I did, as poopy as it was sometimes, because it gave me that like fire. But yeah, but then, you know, once the fire was down to coals, I realized like I really need to take care of myself and like address some of this and let some of this go and like, you know, figure out how it benefits me and what I still need to like what healing I still need to do.
So you're fortunate you learned that at a young age. I mean, I started to learn that at like 56, 57 once I retired, because it sounds like you were like a hyperachiever. You were achieving a lot. And when you're in that achieving energy, in that mode, feelings are a distraction.
Yeah,
right.
totally.
And they get in the way of you getting your stuff done and achieving. And so you push them down. And I had a past guest who said, when you push your feelings down to they go to the basement and they lift weights. You're going to have to deal with them at some point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, and
yeah.
I think like there were other areas of my life that weren't great. You know, my love life, I was dating the same kind of men over and over that would take from me, that would hurt me, that, you know, I felt like I had to perform for, that I was constantly being like, look how worthy I am. Like, but look how great I am. Look at what I bring to the table, you know, like really kind of doing the sort of dance that I was doing as I grew up to try to like get acceptance by my stepfather and my stepbrother, just to try to be like, no, but I'm great, you know? And then I finally had to I got to the point where I was like, I don't care how much money it takes to do the work. Like I will pay as many therapists as I have to. And I, you know, I hired 2 hypnotherapists. I had a talk therapist. I was doing Reiki. I was doing like literally threw everything at the wall because I just didn't want to live like this. And I couldn't keep repeating the same cycles that were bringing me all of this pain up over and over and over. So,
well, and because it's easy to say, well, it's those guys that were the problem, right? But at some point, or it's this situation, or it's this, you know, circumstance in my life, at some point,
totally.
the pointing has to come back to us.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
You did. You took responsibility for your life.
Well, then COVID happened.
Yeah.
So, you know, doing all the things that I was doing in running tours, hosting large scale events, even bartending, everything, I suddenly had useless skills, like across the board. I was like, can't do anything that I've ever done before because it's all closed, right? So I've like literally nothing left. And that's when I was like, no, but this is the time you write that book. So I think, you know, about 5 years prior to COVID, I was taking a bath and I kept hearing, tell her she can't, tell her she can't, tell her she can't. And I was like, oh my God, that's so my freaking life motto. Like, I've always been the person that's like, I will do it because you tell me that I can't do it. Like, that's just who I am. And then I started thinking about why, and like where the root of defiance comes from, and how women aren't really taught to be defiant. That's not like an energy that we raise our young girls to have, and
Right.
and yet I was thinking about so many like strong women that I really look up to, that I know, who are very accomplished, and how many of us have similar stories, of like coming from a young age, being told that we weren't enough, being told that we weren't smart enough, being told that like, what our dreams were for ourselves wasn't attainable. And so I started thinking about actually writing Tell Her She Can't. And I was like, at first I was like, is this just my story? Is this just my book? Because I've lived a really cool life. It's been really fun. I have seen the world and done so many cool things. But then I was thinking like, no, but it's not, it's a tale as old as time, right? Like this is not just my story. This is like part of being a woman in the world, part of being a human in the world, but specifically being a woman in the world. And so I started talking to other ladies in my circle, like the same ones that I was mentioning I'd always looked up to. And I was like, hey, tell me your story. Like, who told you that you couldn't do it? Who told you you couldn't do it? And how did you do it? How did you prove them all wrong? And so I put one call out on Haro, Help a Reporter Out, just saying, I'm looking for women who've overcome the naysayers. Tell me who told you you couldn't and how you proved them all wrong. And I got like 300 emails, literally 300 emails with the most insane, beautiful, painful, gorgeous stories. And I was just like blown away by the capacity that we have as humans and as women. And so I started doing interviews. I just was like, okay, it's COVID. The world is shut down. Everyone is available. Let's just jump on Zoom. So, I mean, for hours, literally for hours, I was having conversations just like this, like you and I are talking, just tell me your story and I'll tell you mine. And we really kind of opened our hearts to each other in that way. And then the book started to take shape because I was like, whoa. So after I interviewed about 100 different women about the things that they had gone through and all the people that they've proved wrong and how they've showed to themselves how strong and beautiful and capable they are, I had to narrow it down to 35 stories that also tied into my own life story, and then figure out how to categorize all of these insane, beautiful stories. So I ended up splitting up the stories into sections. So we have the trailblazers, the change makers, people who actually enact legislative change because of their life stories or things that they've gone through, the warriors, people who've overcome like physical ailments, cancer, so I created all of these sections. And then within those sections, I was also telling my own story. So the book is very much my story, but it's also theirs in a way. Yeah. So it became a project that was like, it gave my own pain and my own story a place to do good. Like it gave it a place to go, and it closed my loop of trauma for me. And and then once it came out in the world, it came out June 28th and instantly became an Amazon #1 bestseller in like 5 different categories. And all the ladies were in Zooms, we were having like book events, and it was like, this is our project. This is the story of how we all did it. And I look at the book now and I'm just like, the dust has settled a bit, right? Because we're in February, but it's just so beautiful when I think of all of the gorgeous stories and the ways that these ladies have used their like deepest vulnerabilities and pains to create positive change for other people. Yeah.
I love that.
And that's
So each of those 35, I think you said they each wrote a chapter, or
no,
did you
not at all.
you wrote it based on your
so we had conversations, and then I put my journalist hat on and transcribed those. And then using that, I wrote their story with their own quotes and then sent it to them. And they were like, oh my gosh, this is my story. So yeah, but it took so much time to do it that way, but it was so much more beautiful because it's a consistent voice throughout, and it's a perspective, I think, that we're all one, and that like
Mhm.
that the concept of being told that you can't do something is forever is a tale as old as time and will forever be. But I think that this book for me is just a great reminder also that like you don't have to listen to that. Like you
Yeah.
get to do whatever you actually want. And it's so funny because the deeper we got in the process of writing this book, I would hear stories that was like, you know, I always wanted to paint, but then I was in fourth grade and my art teacher said, I just don't really see painting for you. So I just stopped painting. And like, and then at 45, you're like, but I think I really am interested in painting and I don't know where that comes from. Right. And if you trace it back, you're like, but why did I stop painting? Because one person told me that I wasn't good at
Right.
painting or it wasn't like the path for me. And so I just stopped. And I think that it's like if we can stop that from happening, like if we can help women, specifically girls, to not listen to that and internalize that and just to realize that it's other people's projections, you know,
Right.
that
I
that that,
agree.
that could be life changing. Like how many potentials could we change, just by putting
Yeah.
that message forth?
I think a lot of us do what we should, right?
Yeah. Well, because it's
And
like in a life full of options, you know, in a
right.
life full of options. And I think sometimes we forget how many options are available to us in our lives, right? Like sometimes I like to just play the what if game. Like, what if I moved to Bali and started a bed and breakfast? Like what would
Mhm.
my life look like that way? Like I just play these
Mhm.
games, right? But we don't, like not everybody does that. So you get
No.
stuck on your track, and you don't
Yeah.
realize, you even forget that you're on the track. And then you realize
Right.
like, wait, but life is full of options.
A lot of
you
people
know
don't stop. We don't stop. I mean, we do this, like I've said before on my show, we do strategic planning at work. And but for our own lives, how often do we just stop and say, what am I doing? Is this how I want to live my life? And then we might say, well, yeah, I'd like to do this, but I can't. But what if you could? That's why I'm like,
yeah,
create a life you love living now. What if you could do that? How do you
yeah,
know
and
you
why
can?
can't you?
Why
Why
can't
can't you?
you? Why
Yeah,
can't
and
you?
I think it's funny because you know specifically for women, a lot of times when we have an idea, we'll go to the people that we trust the most, right? And we're like, I have this idea, I think maybe I'd like to be an accountant. And if the first
No.
thing that if the first thing we hear is, but you're not good at math,
Right.
like that just it dims that energy, and you're like, yeah, you're right, I'm not good at math. Like that could be the end of it, right? so
Right.
so I think it's just remembering that you are life's pilot, not its passenger, and you get to make the decisions on what you want, and being careful with who you trust, because a lot of people that we love are naysayers, and that's
Right.
their own stuff, right? That's
Right. They
their
might say, well,
own
why don't you want to be an
limitations.
accountant? But really, it's like they wouldn't want to be. So why should
Yeah.
you? I mean, that's the way it is sometimes. And so
Or they're like,
we have to
you
just
can't make
go with
money.
what we feel good with. Yeah.
Yes, totally. Or they'll be like, you can't make money doing that. Like you're going to be working all the time. It's going to be terrible. And maybe it's just because they don't want us to be working all the time because they want to see us. They actually love us. They're coming from a good place. But when it comes out in that way, it's very limiting. So you have to just be like, I love you. Thank you for your opinion, but I'm not going to carry it. Like I'm going to go forward in this journey,
Right. Or like my
And
mom would say, well, how are you gonna get health care? That
right.
I mean, fortunately, we have
Exactly.
the Affordable Care Plan where we can, get health care, but that shouldn't be something that stops us completely from following our dreams and living a life that we want to live.
I know. I mean, there's always a way to figure it all out, It's just, and like, so often it's just other people's, like my mother grew up, always thinking like her path, she was going to get married, she was going to have kids. That was the point, So for her, it's really scary to take a stab in the unknown, to build a business, to do
Right.
things that don't immediately equate with financial security, right? So, but that's her stuff.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
and I think
You don't have to take it on.
you don't have to take it on. Yeah,
Mhm.
and it's it makes me sad when I think about how many dreams were probably thwarted at a younger age because of people who just said, I don't see that for you, or like you can't do
Mary
that.
Alice says naysayers have a problem for every solution. Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
Donjette says scars remind us where we've been. They don't dictate where we're going.
That's it. And I think the fourth level of healing for all of this is like when you can take your scars and they don't just remind you of where you've been, they can like help others to see where they're going. Like when you can make your pain into something that is a force for positive good for other people, for me that's like boop boop, it's done. So
Yeah.
I think in the course of writing this book I had to confront a lot of like really painful moments of my life. There's some very graphic stories in there of things that I didn't want to relive, and I had to have some very honest conversations with people that I love, because I was like, this is the way that my life happened to me, and I just want to prepare you for that before I put it out publicly. But like those conversations ultimately led to such healing, such profound healing. And
Good.
also, when I was writing this book, I had such crazy anxiety. Like, middle of the night, I was like, I can't write this story. I can't write these stories. I can't tell people this. Like, I got to delete my social media. I got to delete my Instagram. Like, at 3 o'clock in the morning, I was like, I got to pull the plug on the whole thing. I can't do it, you know? And I just had to be like, nope, you can do it, because nobody's going to tell you that you can't, especially not you.
Well, the thing is that you're not alone. Your story, a lot of people resonate with, I'm sure,
Yeah, I know.
and the other stories in the book. And so you start to realize, that you're not alone. And then when you tell your story, it frees others up to feel like they can tell theirs, or that they can go and address some of their past, and that they don't have to be held back. So what are some recurring themes, are there any that you take away from that book?
In the book, for sure, resilience is beautiful. And even if you don't know where you're going, just put one foot in front of the other, like protect yourself in whatever you have to do. I think there's a lot of really, really great stories in this book. There's so many. God, I just keep thinking of all of the different ladies that I've spoken to. I mean, I have a story in here, for example, about a woman who lost her leg as a child. And so she grew up with a prosthetic leg, and she was told that she couldn't do this, she couldn't do that. And now, as an adult, she runs a nonprofit that helps children in developing nations get access to prosthetics legs. So it's like just beautiful. I have another story about a woman whose son has diabetes, and no one in her family had diabetes. She didn't know anything about it. And she was like, when he needs food, I need to give him quick, healthy food, and there isn't that option. So she created a chain of healthy, organic drive-through restaurants. I mean, just like beyond,
Yeah.
And I also have stories of women who, like, I have the story of a woman who cross-country skied Antarctica by herself, and everybody was like, you can't do this, you don't know how to do this is terrifying. And even people who had done it, who were men, who were like, this is going to be very difficult for you. And she did it, and she had to confront some really dark moments and dark parts of herself in the process of that. And it's like, you don't have to cross-country ski Antarctica by yourself, but I can guarantee that you have a moment in your life where you thought about doing something, and somebody told you, like, I don't think you should do it,
Mm-hmm.
Like, just beyond that, just on the other side of that is like a valley of potential, literally anything that you want. Once you start doing things, you realize that you are the one that makes the impossible possible. And then you become the leader, right? Then you become like the one that people look to, and people say, oh, you're so inspiring because you did it anyway. So
Right.
it ends up being like, it ends up creating a chain for good.
Yeah, it sure does. So what would you tell your younger self?
I've done a lot of like younger parts work. I mean, what I always do when I see my younger self is like I give her a huge hug, and I tell her that like things are really, really hard, and they won't get better for a long time, but in the end it will all make sense. Like I have to believe that I grew up the way that I did so that I could one day be the person that I am, so that I could write this book that could change other people. You know what I mean? I have to believe that it had to happen And if I had a life that was just easy, I would never, and sometimes I'm like, God, wouldn't that have been nice? I would have saved myself years of questioning whether I'm worthy, whether I'm enough, whether I'm good enough, whether I can. But I think ultimately I'm thankful for that, because I got to provide myself with those answers, and I got to decide that I was enough and that I could be, and that anything that I wanted was possible. And that is still how I look at life, is like anything that I want is possible if I want it, if I decide to take that road. So.
Did you already have that, or did that come with working with, I don't know, coaches or counselors, or you said you did a lot of that work?
Yeah, I mean, my mom was very spiritual, sort of new age spiritual as I was growing up. Like, she would tell me, I used to get ear infections when I was a baby, and she would say like, "Oh, it's because you heard your life was going to be hard and you didn't want to
I
hear it. Like,
see.
you didn't want to hear
Mhm.
these things." And
Mhm.
I would be like, "No, I'm pretty sure I just had an ear infection." But but she always had these kinds of like ways of looking at things. And when I was 11, and she was like, "You can look at this, you could let this define you, or you can use it as fuel." I mean, that's a big lesson for someone who's, sixth grade.
Yeah.
And I am thankful that I had that, because I was able to look at my life and be like, but it has to all make sense, right? Like, it has to somehow. And even if it doesn't, like, even if it doesn't all make sense, and it wasn't for like it, for me, I have to give it a definition. Like, I can't just
Right.
let that pain sit inside of me and hold me back any longer, for my own self, like for my own mental well-being.
Right.
So,
So tell us about, you've got this Women's Travel Fest coming up. What is
yeah.
that all about?
Yeah, so I started the Women's Travel Fest 9 years ago, which is crazy. I just wanted to talk about travel. Again, I was like so just out of my house, out in the world, just traveling, backpacking, living this really wild, fun life. I lived in New Zealand for a year, and I worked for a company that did Lord of the Rings tours. Like, I did everything as fast as I could. And so at some point, I started meeting other ladies who loved to travel by themselves and having conversations about travel and what that looked like for us. And so I was like, I love these conversations, and I want to do this in a bigger way. So I started the Women's Travel Fest, which has now grown to be a 3-day conference that's all about inspiring and connecting women who love to travel. We share information about our adventures, where we've been, where we're going, lessons learned, tips on safety, budgeting, and kind of everything in between. So
I
it's
love
sort of my
that.
favorite thing that I do. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's a passion based event. So, people who come and they just want to talk about travel. And I love that, because like, I want to talk about travel all the time. So
I've had
yeah,
a
so then
friend, I interviewed her in the beginning, and I got to connect you to. She loves to travel too. Her name is Robin Finney, and she goes to the World Domination Summit. In fact, that's where I met her. So I'll connect you guys by
yeah,
email
that'd
or
be great.
something. But do you lead trips?
I do. Yeah. So after a few years of having Women's Travel Fest, I was like, this is awesome. Let's actually take people traveling. So I started leading tours around the world, and I still do, through my company called Damesly. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I took a group to Egypt in October. I'm taking a group to Morocco in March, and then I have this really cool women's winemaker tour that I'm running in Georgia, the country of Georgia, in August, which I'm super excited about. And I just love it. I love it.
So
I love
where do
everything about it.
people find that? They go to your website right here,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's where they can
Well,
find all the trips and stuff.
yeah. So Tell Us She Can't is mostly for the book, but that'll
Mhm.
lead you into the portal of my stuff. Damesly is Damesly, like Damesly, which is a play on words between damsel and dame. And we do tours, and then Women's Travel Fest is actually coming up in like 3 weeks. So the next one's
Mhm.
in Portland in 3 weeks, and
Yeah.
then it's exciting. Next year's our 10th year anniversary show, so I'm really excited about what that's going to be like.
Oh yeah, that's a lot of. It takes a lot to plan those events. I used to do that when I was in the with the Navy. I would help plan like events for small businesses to learn how to do business with the government. But it's a lot of coordination to plan all that. I
It's so
am
much
going on.
coordination.
I'm going on a trip coming up with this company called Explorer Chicks.
Oh yeah.
You know them? They're
Yep.
in
So she's
North.
gonna be at Women's Travel Fest, the founder of that
Okay.
company.
Yeah, I was
Mhm.
thinking that maybe she would. Going next weekend, I'm going snowshoeing in West Virginia, snowshoeing one day, cross country skiing another day, and hiking another day. So
Oh, fun.
I don't even know who's signing. I just went and going by myself. So I don't even know any of the other women, but
That's the
and I'm
best
doing,
way.
yeah, and I'm doing I'm just staying in the States this year. I'm doing a backpacking trip because I like to go. It's hiking. It's not backpacking, but it's like wilderness, trains you like for things to be careful of in the wilderness. Because I go hiking a lot by myself. So I just want to learn some safety tips and things like that. And
Yeah.
that's in June. And I hope I can still go because at some point I'm going to have knee replacement surgery. So I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but I want to go on that. But yeah, so that's cool that she's going to Explore Tricks chicks. They lead a lot of cool trips all across the
Yeah,
world too.
totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really cool. When I started Go Girl, there was no like women's travel industry at all. Like there was maybe a blog, it was really like a very early idea. And so I'm really proud to be able to be like a part of the wave of women who are doing cool things for other women in the travel space. And I mean travel like showed me how strong I am. Like ultimately, it showed me I mean and it taught me that people really are mostly good and people are really mostly kind and that the world
Yeah.
really is mostly safe. And like when I started traveling, those were things that I needed to know, like for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah,
So,
so it's
I
changed
think
everything.
some women might be, a little nervous to travel on their own. So I think that's why your groups like that are helpful. Is it for women only?
It is, yeah. And the ladies that come on my trip are so fun. Most of them come by themselves just because they're like, I'm tired of waiting for my husband. I'm tired of waiting for my friends to get it together. Like, I just want to go and meet some fun people. And I mean, we all become friends. We have text threads for years. Like, it's so much fun. And the company is really growing. COVID threw a wrench into everything, but I'm actively hiring tour guides and like we have a lot of demand right now, which is great because we're starting to get back into what we used to do, which is travel,
Yeah.
before the pandemic. So
Yeah. Well, congratulations on starting that
thank
company, having
you.
a successful business, having it continue through COVID, writing your book. Like how many hours a day did you write? How long did it take you to write that book?
I honestly it was like my full-time job for
Yeah.
about 3, maybe 4 months. Full time. Like I was writing all day, and I would be like, let me just get a chapter, let me get one person's story done. Let me see if I can do one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And yeah, as it started to come together, then the hardest part was writing my own stories because again, I was like revisiting some of that trauma. And some of
Yeah.
it was so intense that I would be writing and then all of a sudden I would find myself with like a fork in the peanut butter jar in the kitchen. Like, how did I get here? I just
Mm.
had to like
Yeah.
keep moving myself through it. Yeah, but man, am I proud of it when it came out. She's just like a little hot pink
Yeah.
snowball, little hot pink
Yeah.
fireball.
You had never written a book before or ever been a part of writing a book?
Well, I'd written guidebooks, travel
Yeah, the
guidebooks, yeah,
guidebooks.
through Go
But
Girl. Yeah, but this was
yeah.
kind of my first foray into nonfiction in that capacity. That wasn't like here's where to stay and where to eat, all the things. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Hi, Garen. Hi, Donjette. We've got a Facebook user here. I'm not sure who that is. Hi, John. Pramila. We've got so many people. Bill Bradford. So thank you guys for joining us. And if you have any questions for for Kelly, submit them. Let us know what questions you have, or tell us, in the chat, where have you traveled? Where's the farthest of you've traveled? Has anyone traveled to all 7 continents like Kelly has? That's amazing.
Yeah, Antarctica is the best. It really is. It's such an amazing place.
I was married to a guy that had been stationed in Antarctica 3 times. And it was
Wow.
just unbelievable. He was watching the weather. He was a weather watcher. They would take the temperatures and do different things down there. And I wasn't married to him when he went there. It was way after, but yeah, he really loved it.
Yeah, it's a really special place, I mean, yeah, the world is it's like looking at the world before we started messing with it. It's kind of like looking at what it would have looked like thousands of years ago.
Mhm.
And it's just so special.
How'd you
So,
get there?
by boat.
By boat.
Yeah,
Okay.
by
there's
boat. You
boats.
take a boat from Ushuaia at the southern point of Argentina.
Mhm. So what's your favorite place to travel?
Oh, you can't ask me that. I mean, I have so many favorites. It's like choosing a kid. I mean, top 5:
Yeah, top 5. Give us that.
New Zealand, Morocco. There's something about like some places for different people. You go and you're like, I feel a connection here. For
Mhm.
me, that's Morocco. Every time I go, I'm like, I could just live here. I could just not leave and be totally happy. Argentina, I feel that way in Buenos Aires every time I go. What else? Iceland is gorgeous. Jordan was amazing. I could keep going. Egypt, I've been so many times, and every time I'm like, the scope of history in Egypt just blows my mind.
Yeah.
like I can't understand how I'm looking at something that is like negative 300 years old.
I know.
How?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's wild.
I saw some of that when I went to Verona, Italy. I saw some things that were pretty old there, but yeah, Egypt probably even older.
Yeah.
So,
But
yeah.
everywhere you go, there you are. And like, I think probably because I was so like running, like the second that I could, I went to as many places as I could. And I was almost like voracious about it. Like I would dream about places. I had to travel. I didn't care about many. I would sleep on people's floors. I couch surfed my way across South America. I would do all of these kinds of like things just because I needed to be out in the world. And I loved the feeling of like being surrounded by people where nobody knew anything about me. And, I could look at a single day and I could be like, I get to choose every single part of this day and nobody can tell me that I can't do it. Like if I want to like lay in bed and eat ramen, I can do that. If I want to go hike to a waterfall, I can do that. And I still love traveling because I love seeing all of the possibilities. That really lights me up. And it's funny because my fiance, when he travels, he doesn't really feel like that. He's just like, okay, we're doing the thing and we're doing the thing and then we're going to go home. Because he's much more like a homebody. And I'm like, no, but what if we just stayed out? What if we just kept going? He's like, no, we have to go home. So he sees the world differently than I do,
John says, how's Patagonia?
Spectacular. Really amazingly spectacular. Yeah. I mean, the
Anyone
southern
watching could come up with a spot that you've never been. You've been to them all. That's amazing.
There's some places I haven't been that you would think that I would, like Costa Rica. I'm like, how have I not been to Costa Rica?
I've been there.
No.
All the places you listed. Yeah, you got to go there. It is cool.
Yeah. It's funny because for my 35th birthday, I made a list of places and I was like, hey, everybody, like asking my friends, like, hey, would you like to go to all these places with me? And they were like, Mongolia. It's like all the places that are on my bucket list, and they just like weren't really into it. And I'm like, well, I'll go with or without you at some point, So,
yeah. That is interesting. You and your fiance are gonna have to work some things. I mean, you'll get a lot of your travel leading some of these trips, right?
Yeah, I do. I mean, and because of it, I've been to Morocco, 12 times. I'm going again in March, and I'm like, okay, I love this place. I'll keep going back. Egypt, I've been to. We've led trips there 5 years in a row now. Yeah, and Georgia, I love. I'm super excited about that trip. We just added that to the schedule yesterday, and already have some people signed up for it. So it's really fun to also be like, where can I take people and show them a place in a different way? Like how can I integrate what I love to do, which is traveling, with being around people, which I love, and like make everyone have an experience that they walk away with and think like, God, that was so unique. That's always my goal, is to like really make something special.
And I want to travel, but I don't want to have to plan anything.
Yeah. Well, that's
about it. So
then I'm your gal. I'm here for you. I can I can do custom trips.
I mean, yeah.
Totally. Yeah. One thing we just
Go
Oh,
ahead.
so sorry. One thing we just started doing is custom travel planning because I was getting a lot of emails that's like, hey, I want to go on a trip, but I don't really like the idea of a group trip. And I was like, okay, that's fine. What's your dream trip? And they were like, Iceland. And I was like, perfect. How about I plan a 4-day itinerary for you, showing you the highlights of Iceland? I can book everything for you. And like, that started another leg of the business that I didn't know existed until, people started asking me for it. So,
Oh yeah. Because when I went to Costa Rica, I went with my 2 roommates from the Naval Academy, and they like to plan. They planned everything. I'm just like, I'll just show up. What airport do I fly into? And we went to like 3 different hotels, and we took a boat, and we went on this volcano, did this. And I was just like, just tell me where to show up, and I'll be there, and then I'll do whatever. But I didn't want to plan it.
yeah,
So
some people love it. Like I just put out a job post for a travel planner because the business is growing, and I probably have 150 emails from people being like, I'm the one that's always planning trips. Like, I love it. I'm the one in my friend
right.
group. And that's awesome. I think it just like, for me, travel is like freedom. That's how I equate it. And so
Yeah.
growing up, not feeling like I had much freedom, it was very much like I have to travel to kind of reclaim that for myself. And I still view it as freedom. So when people don't, like if you don't want to plan trips, like I love to do that. So
Mhm.
it's really fun to be able to put my passions into my own business and like to have done all of the work so that I'm in this place now. And yeah, I'm very
It's
thankful.
amazing. It's amazing. Not everybody gets to do what they love for a living, or
Yeah.
they could maybe, but they're nervous, or whatever. Not everyone
Yeah.
does what you're doing, and I think that's awesome. So, what does creating a life you love living, what does that mean for you?
It means asking myself again and again if I'm as happy as I could be, if I am where I want to be, and correcting course regardless of anyone else's perceptions or limitations or thoughts on how I should or shouldn't do it. Ultimately, like I am the driver of my life, and like knowing that in my bones has made me kind of fearless. And I'm really thankful for that because like even if I go completely broke, I know I'll figure it out. If my businesses go belly up, I know I'll be fine, Like it's kind of this resilient mindset that I have,
You sure
um
do.
that I'm very thankful for.
You sure do. Yeah. So, does your mom still live in Hawaii?
She lives in Austin actually, but she's moving back soon. So,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
yeah.
So, why did you end up settling down in Portland, Oregon? You've been all over the world. Why Portland?
Yeah, I mean, I was living in New York City for 7 years, and I just wanted something different. Came
Mm,
to Portland, and it was so fun.
I
And then
know it
COVID
is.
hit, and then I stayed
Yeah.
inside for a really long time. And now my fiance and I are like, maybe we should move back to Hawaii. So and it's funny because I went to Hawaii last weekend, and I was kind of having kind of like an identity crisis because it's like, I love this place. I know this place. I've been here for so long. I know every turn of this road. I know every house on this street. But at the same time, like the whole time that I lived here, which was my entire until I graduated high school, I was trying to leave. So I almost feel like I need to have a chapter as an adult where I get to reclaim that part where I'm just settled, where I'm not like running. And yeah, I mean it's a beautiful, beautiful place to live, and I'm
Yeah.
very thankful to have grown up there.
Wow. Well, I am so glad that you reached out to me to be on the Onward podcast. And I want to share again, as we wrap this up, your website. Tell her she can't. And you can go to that website and order the book, learn about the book. And then also you can get to your other stuff on travel, right? Your
Yeah,
Dames.
totally. And I'm all over the internet at Go Kelly Lewis. So I am very findable. One almost too findable. Like, I get messages like last night. I got a message at like 11:30, and I sometimes forget to turn off, right? So I'm just like, oh yeah, here's what you should wear at Travel Fest this year. Like getting back to them, and they're like, I'm sorry, it's really late, and I'm like, oh yeah, it is really late. Like I should stop doing this. I should set hours. But that being said, reach out to me at any point. I'm always here to help.
And then here's your book, Tell Her She Can't. And it's your story woven in with stories of about 35 women, you said.
35 other women who overcame the naysayers, lived their dreams, proved everyone wrong, and changed the world in the process. And I mean, the ladies in my book are so cool, and I'm so thankful that I know them now. Like, they're so inspiring. And let me just share a couple other stories that I really think about all the time. So there's a woman in my book named Sandra Hart, and she started a YouTube channel at age 79. And now at age 81 has 6 million subscribers. So can you imagine how many people in her life, like in her family, maybe her grandkids were like, what are you doing on YouTube? Like, I don't know. Why would you get on YouTube, Grandma? Like, this seems like a weird thing for you to do. And now look at her. She's this huge, thriving community. She's a total success, and she's a wonderful human being and such a doll. And like, I think about her all the time because it's like, why couldn't I do it? If I believe that I can do it, I'm going to do it. And so she inspires me to no end. And, there's so many stories like that in this book. That's like, I emailed the oldest female BMX racer who's still racing at age 75. I mean, she's still riding BMX bikes. Like, she's so cool. Her name's Miss Kitty. She lives in, Des Moines, actually, but she's from Raleigh, North Carolina. But she's just the coolest. Like, she's broken her leg. She's broken her neck. She doesn't care. She's on that bike. She's doing her thing. And like, she's blazing trails for other women to come and ride with her. So it's just really neat, when you think about like, yeah, whatever you want to do, like, it's up to you to do it, right? Because there's always going to be people who are like, don't do that. It's not safe. I don't see it for you. It's not a good fit for you. There are always going to be people who impose their opinions on you, right? But like, just do it anyway. And then they get to be the people who are like, oh my gosh, you go, girl. Like, they're going to be your biggest cheerleaders once you actually do it. And that's what's so funny, it's like once you do it and people see that, then you become the person that leads the way for other people. And those same people who doubted you, then they reconsider, and they're like, but what about me? Like, if she could do this, if she could become a BMX racer, like maybe I could become an accountant, or maybe I could move to Hawaii, or maybe, whatever it is that your dream is that you've been holding on to. Like, yeah. And I think with COVID too, I just am so constantly reminded that like life is not forever. We get this shot. We get this one shot to make it the best that we can, and it's up to you to do that. Nobody else is going to change your life for you. You have to be the one that's like, no, I'm not as happy as I could be, and I'm going to go out and find it, like I'm going to be fearless in making those decisions, even if they're really hard decisions, even if they come with, having to sacrifice relationships or having to distance yourself from relationships that are important to you, the people that you really love. I think sometimes those are the hardest things, right? But
yeah, I was going to say that you might have to, if you're hanging out with a bunch of people, I mean, that are pulling you down, you've got to really make a decision if those are the people you want to hang out with, and maybe find people that have the attitude like you do, Kelly, like, let's go do it,
Yeah.
And then that's going to boost you up and help you, help you.
Yeah, and it boosts them too. I think that's the thing is like, we always hear, you are who your top 5 people that you surround yourself with reflect who you are, right?
Yeah.
But I also think that like life is just like, we're always rotating. So like maybe right now you have to distance yourself from one friend that isn't supportive, but maybe in 5 years you'll come back around. I believe that relationships can hold that same value. It's just timing, right? So like you just have to go on your specific journey and trust that the rest will fall into place, and the people that you love will be there for you when they're ready in their own way, in their own journey. And if not, there's so much love in the world. The entire world is vibrating with love. like our core basis is love, I believe, and we just muck it up, So the more we
Donjette
get
says,
tapped into that,
yeah.
it's like you
Donjette
can
says
really be fearless.
only you control your future. That's true, Donjette. Yeah. Well, so let's see. Well, as we wrap it up, tell us one more time about this Travel Fest in Portland.
Yeah, Women's Travel Fest, the 9th annual Women's Travel Fest, is March 4th through the 6th in Portland, Oregon, and I'd love to see you there. It's so much fun. It is just a great event full of women who love to travel and kind of the best community. Yeah, and it's going to be a total blast. We have some incredible keynote speakers this year, including a woman who walked across the earth. So, like, literally with her 2 feet, I mean, and that's the thing is like,
What do you mean across the earth?
She walked across the earth. She walked the course of North America, South America. She walked the course of Africa. She has walked with her feet thousands of miles. And so the thing about Women's Travel Fest and about potential is that sometimes you don't realize, like, I will probably never do that. I don't really have an inner desire to walk across the earth. But maybe after seeing her photos and hearing her stories and finding out what it was like for her, I'll think about doing a smaller version of that. Mm-hmm. Or like, that it opens up my potential. It opens up the possibility. And I think that's the funnest thing for me about Women's Travel Fest is like people will come to the show and make a change in their life because of something they heard at the show, whether they're like, I'm going to live in Spain now for a year. This is what decided it for me. I'm moving to Spain, right? This has happened. This is a true story. They moved to Spain and then they email me and they're like, hey, I just want to let you know, I'm sitting on my terrace in Barcelona and the show that you put on changed my life because I moved to Spain and I'm living what I always wanted to live. Like, put a stake in it. It's still wrap for me. I can ask for nothing more, you know? So
have you ever been afraid?
All the time.
Yeah. Okay. I was gonna ask.
All the time. I just
come
have
across
to
as
be like
confident. Let me travel here, travel there, but you also
totally
feel fear. Yeah, and you
do
it anyway.
Exactly. Honestly, the older I've gotten, the more anxiety I've felt. I don't know what that's about. When I was like 23 and starting Go Girl, I was like, I'll figure it out. I'll eat rice, I'll eat beans, it'll be fine. The older I get, the bigger the stakes get, the bigger the sponsorships get, the more public I get, the more visible I get, the more it gets intense, and there's definitely moments where I'm like, I just feel too visible. I feel like I'm too out there. And you know what actually changed that thought for me recently? Jennifer Lawrence. She went on a talk show and she was like, I just felt like people didn't want to hear from me anymore. And I was like, I can so relate to that feeling of feeling like you're just too visible. You're just talking too much. You're just doing too much, And so I just try to remind myself, like, if I'm really feeling like that, I have the power to kind of go within, get creative, take some baths, do some journaling. Like, I get to control my levels,
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel fear constantly. I just don't entertain it. And also, the last thing I want to say on that note is like the feeling of fear and the feeling of excitement are two vibrationally the same feelings. Mm-hmm. So whenever I'm like, and I say this all the time, like, I'm scared to get on stage. I'm scared to do this podcast. I'm scared, not this podcast, but you know what I mean? Like, if I'm feeling really, really scared, I'll try to reframe it and be like, no, I'm excited. I'm excited.
Because our words have energy too.
Yeah. And it changes the way that I feel about it. I'm like, I'm not scared. Right. I am excited, because there's always that moment before Travel Fest when the room is full and I'm getting ready to go on stage and I'm like terrified, but then I get on stage and I'm like, I'm in my element. I got this, like I am excited. You just got to remind yourself that you can.
Shannon says, most of all, you have to trust yourself on your journey. And then I'm not sure who's on Facebook, but the viewer says, I love everything about this. And then words absolutely have energy and power. Yeah, they do.
For sure. Yeah. And so, when I was interviewing ladies for Tell Her She Can't, and I was saying, who told you that you can't? I was actually surprised how many times the ladies were like, I'm the one that's telling myself that I can't.
Yeah.
I am. It's me. I'm saying it. And then we'd be like, but why? We have these conversations of like, but why do you think that you can't do that? And then things like,
Kelly, yeah,
I'm too
got it.
short, you know?
Yeah, no,
I'm
you can make up all these reasons why you can't. Find one why you can.
totally. But what if you did? What if you
if you
asked yourself,
could?
but what if you did? You
Yeah.
know?
How do you know you can't? How do you know you're too short? How do you know?
Yeah,
We create with our minds this box around us that we don't leave, but it doesn't have to be there.
totally.
Mhm.
I agree.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for being on my podcast. I really appreciate it, being on Onward Live. And this will be published later in a few weeks as a podcast. So I really appreciate it. And congratulations on everything you're doing. I hope to go on one of your trips one day. I'm going to look them up.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a really fun conversation, and I hope that it left you feeling empowered as a listener and inspired to remember that you can do anything. So go out and do it and tell me what you did.
Yeah, report back. You can find
Yeah.
Kelly. Thank you, everybody. This was an inspiring podcast, an inspiring show. And message me, message Kelly. Let us know where you decided to travel or what did you decide to do differently with your life after watching this show. And maybe you'll go to Travel Fest too. All right. I'll see you guys next week. I have 2 shows next week, one on Tuesday and one on Wednesday. So I'll publish about them either tonight or tomorrow. So hope to see you at one or both of those. Thank you very much. Bye. Onward Live is sponsored by Emily Harmon Coaching and Consulting. Visit my website, emilyharmon.com, to learn more about me and my coaching programs. I'd love to help you create a life you love living. Remember, every adversity is our own personal university. Sometimes the lessons are difficult, and we must learn from our experiences. Vulnerability is your superpower. You are lovable and worthy. And we discuss these topics and more because professional is personal. Thank you for joining us and engaging with me and my guest. I look forward to seeing you next time.